This man was in the Ravens draft room all weekend long. Well, not all weekend. He was in on their Saturday for the fourth round, where it felt like it was all weekend long because they had 6 picks in one round alone. And not surprising, he managed to check out a baseball game while he was in town. Of course, you read his stuff at NBCSports.com, and really must read today, Football Morning in America. He is the great Peter King, and he's back with us now here on GCR. Peter, it's Glenn in Baltimore. It's always good to catch up with you. Thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes for us this morning.
Hey, no problem. Happy to do it.
Peter, can you give me an idea how this came about? Why did you want to spend the fourth round of the draft in the Ravens draft room?
Well, I thought this was a different draft, sort of a weird draft, because it was not a particularly top-heavy draft, although people do go insane for players at the top of every draft. First of all, there were no quarterbacks this year that were no doubt have-to-have guys. Mm-hmm. And I think most people thought that the herd kind of thinned out pretty early on in this draft. But there was one difference in this draft, and that is that because in 2020, a lot of college players had abridged seasons and did not play at all, did not play very much. Many players who might have come out in the 2021 draft, and I wrote about one of them, Charlie Kolar, tight end from Iowa State. He might have come out, but he decided to go back in for another year because of the circumstances in 2020. So all of these guys, I think probably well over 100 prospects who were in this draft were in the draft because they didn't come out in 2021. And it just made the middle class of this draft a lot better. That being said, the Ravens for a long time had 5 fourth-round picks, and then obviously in trading from 23 to 25 with Buffalo, in the first round on Thursday, that got them their 6th fourth-round pick. And so I asked the Ravens a couple of months ago, I really thought it would be interesting to be in there. And so I talked and, had quite a few conversations. And finally they said, yeah, you can do it. And so I did it. I sat in there for 2 hours, a little bit before the fourth round started, and then through the last pick of the fourth, got up, walked out, and that's what I saw.
So, what blows me away, we talk, Peter, we do this silly radio bit, this Would You Rather Wednesday game we play every week, which is, it's earth-shattering. We take one scenario and another scenario, and we say, which one would you prefer? It's unbelievable the way we do it. We're really changing the game over here.
Yeah.
And one of the scenarios that we put out normally around this time involves like the idea that would you like to be in the Ravens draft room? And one of the things I always say is I don't know if I would, because you'd never be able to say anything about it. And that's kind of what blew my mind about your piece today, is that they let you tell some stories, including the one that's getting all the attention about Calvin Austin, that they didn't say, hey, you can be in here, but we're going to guard what it is that we allow to come out. Like there was a player they wanted, and they didn't get it, and they're not hiding from that.
Well, I mean, in that particular case, if I wasn't going to be able to write that, then why am I in there?
That's a very fair point.
Yeah, it's just, it would be, homogenized crapola if you can't write what actually happened in the room. And so I think that obviously that's the most interesting and sort of intriguing thing, that at pick number 1, I mean, it's a 3-pronged story. At pick number 130, they take a punter, and everybody goes, wow, a punter in the middle of the fourth round in this golden time for this draft. And so I'll tell you the story about the punter in a second, but then by taking the punter instead of taking Calvin Austin at 130, the wide receiver from Memphis, they knew that they were risking somebody in the next 9 picks or next 8 picks taking Calvin Austin before they picked at 139. So they were almost all the way through it. You could tell that there was real happiness in the room. For those who don't know, Calvin Austin is a guy who's a 4.3, I forget, 4.35 40 guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's the last really fast, accomplished receiver in the draft. The reason he lasted this long is that he's 5'7", and even though he was durable at Memphis, people had a lot of questions about what he'd actually be able to do. But for the Ravens, if you want to play the guy 15 or 20 snaps a game, then, that might be the best role for him, as an outside receiver and, a speed threat. Anyway, they thought that they had him. And at 138, there's a little speaker on the table in the Ravens draft room, and it connects them to the draft in Vegas. And NFL Central is kind of telling them who's picked, a minute before it's announced. And so they hear that Calvin Austin gets picked by the Steelers at 138, and they say Baltimore Ravens are on the clock. And so what was really, really interesting about that moment is that I hear that, and a voice from inside the room just said, "You got to be effing kidding me."
Mm-hmm.
And, so there was disappointment. But I looked at DaCosta, Ozzie Newsome, and Harbaugh right then. And I looked at all three of them, and they were all like, reading a library book at the Randallstown Library. It was just, there was no emotion, expressionless. Let's just move on. Right away, they said, "Hey, what about Isaiah Likely? He's a guy who went to Coastal Carolina, was a combo platter, tight end, wide receiver. He's not fast, but he's really big, playmaker, blah, blah, blah." So they start asking around the room, "Okay, we'll take Isaiah Likely." There was not any emotion when they lost him. And I knew at that time that there would be emotion on the outside, especially because it was the Steelers that pilfered Calvin Austin,
Yep.
Austin right from under him. But, when I was leaving, DaCosta walked outside, and I shook hands. I said, "Thank you," and all that. And I asked him about it. He just shrugged his shoulders, and he goes, "That's the draft." I saw one instance of it. They see it 10 times every year.
Sure.
And so they weren't, they would have rather had Austin, but they aren't really that upset about it because they understand. Can I give you one little X factor now on the punter at 130?
I'd love that, Peter. Peter King is
So,
with us here on Glenn Clark Radio.
Yeah. So the punter became a really interesting pick because my whole thought, the natural thought was, well, geez, who's going to take a punter at 130 after? But at 133, Tampa Bay took the Georgia punter. Okay, and I found out later that there was some information out there on the GM grapevine that Cincinnati at 137 and Tampa at 133 were both interested in punters. And that's one of the reasons that motivated the Ravens to take him where they took him. Now, I can't tell you what team it is, but this morning, about a couple of hours ago, a general manager sent me a text, and he goes, "I got chills reading about the Brandon Stout section in that column because we were going to take him." And in fact, I was waiting for that pick to be taken, and I was going to text Eric DaCosta right then and tell him, "Hey, let's work out a deal. I want your 139th pick," because he wanted to draft Brandon Stout. And he said, then they draft Brandon Stout at 130. And I say, "Oh, crap." And so he said, I never sent him the text. I never contacted him about it. So that is the kind of stuff that happens in the draft all the time that, is cool to be able to witness and experience.
But by the way, Peter King, this is, and I realize that I'm not doing what they do for a living. This is why, the entire draft week is going to be nothing but paranoia for me. Nothing but who is tipping someone else off to what it is that we're trying to do. I would be None of you are allowed to have your cell phones. None of you are allowed to have your computer. Like, I would be that guy if I.
Yeah.
It's probably why I could never do this for a living.
You have to have trust of, there's a lot of people in that draft room, and if you don't trust them, or if you think stuff is getting out, if stuff is leaking out, you got to cut it off at the head. And it impressed me that I don't think they have that many people in there for the first 2 days, but for day 3, the scouts come in, and there were more people in there than I thought might be in there. But I think DaCosta and Ozzie have to understand everybody in there are men and women who they can trust.
Peter, can I ask you a couple of just broader questions, if I
Yeah.
could? One being, we were talking about this early in the show. The Ravens are getting unilaterally praised for this draft because they didn't panic. They did what they always do, right? They take the best player available. They stay true to their board, and even if it's not a need, they end up coming away with Kyle Hamilton and David Ajabo and Tyler Linderbaum and these guys that are thought of as being top guys at each of their respective positions. I'm so confused by how to measure what the Rams did in winning a Super Bowl because we've always accepted in Baltimore, because it's what we're used to with the Ravens. The best player available is what you do. But the Rams kind of threw us all into upheaval and said the draft doesn't even matter. They took Tutu Atwell in the second round. That was their only top 100 pick a year ago, and they won a Super Bowl. And I wonder if things are shifting at all within the NFL, that the model of building year after year and always trying to be good and always trying to be competitive isn't any longer the best model for winning Super Bowls specifically. And I'm not saying that. I'm asking how I measure everything that I've seen.
I think it's a great question, and I think that the Los Angeles Rams showed that there's a different way to win the Super Bowl than the classic NFL architecture way, and good for them. It makes it more fun. Isn't it more fun when teams are wheeling and dealing and trading and all that stuff? And although I think it's really sad that A.J. Brown is no longer a Tennessee Titan, because he got drafted 3 years ago in the middle of the second round to be a long-term answer for them, and he played fantastic. And the reward to Tennessee for that is getting conked over the head by what's happening elsewhere in other teams with the salary cap. And in the span of a few months, the price of a premium receiver has gone from $20 million to maybe $30 million, like in the matter of weeks. So there's a lot of teams that cannot adjust to that and don't have the cap flexibility to do that, and it caused them to lose a guy. But it's almost like you shouldn't. It makes sense to bemoan that and to basically say, "Man, this stinks." But what are you going to do? You got to exist in the environment that you live in. And so the Rams say, "Hey, listen, we're going to be picking." Everybody said, "But you got a half year out of Von Miller, and he cost you a second and a third round pick." Well, think of it this way. I think I'm right in saying that Von Miller cost them the 64th and 96th picks in this draft. Okay. On the other hand, Von Miller made 3 plays in the Super Bowl that were gigantic. I'm not saying that, they wouldn't have won the Super Bowl without Von Miller. They might not have. And, so isn't that what every team is in business to do, to win a Super Bowl? I went to the Rams party after they won. I was there for about 2 hours at 1:00 in the morning after the Super Bowl. And I got to tell you, they all had the attitude of Les Snead. See, this proves that not necessarily that it's the best way to do it, but that it can work. You can dump your picks for players and get Matthew Stafford and Jalen Ramsey and Von Miller, and they can help you win. And then you got nothing in the draft other than developmental players like they take in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds. So it's funny. About a month ago, I was texting with Les Snead, and he said, "Remember, we still got 8 picks." and it's just when the picks come.
Right.
And so, anyway, there's no one answer to how to build a team, but the Rams have proven you can win a Super Bowl building a team unconventionally.
And Peter, before I let you go, because it's all we're talking about in Baltimore, we still have this Lamar Jackson thing kind of looming, and now who knows what to make of what he was tweeting about with the Hollywood Brown thing. It doesn't make any sense because he knew about it. I don't know why he was tweeting the way. It's very strange. But what do you make of it? This is unprecedented.
I don't think it's that big a deal.
Okay.
I just don't. I don't know why he tweeted WTF.
Right.
I don't know why. Because this is just me from the outside. I've not talked to Lamar Jackson, not talked to Hollywood Brown. I don't know. But I will just say this. They're good friends.
Right.
It would shock me if they have not had multiple conversations about how miserable Hollywood Brown was in this offense. I mean, of course he's the quarterback. You're the receiver. You're very good friends. So how in the world would Lamar not know that he wants out and he wants to go to a place where he can be the deep threat that he was drafted to be? So I don't know why Lamar is doing that. I don't know, but I would not think it's a really big deal. Personally, I wouldn't, because honestly, wouldn't you want the best for your friends?
Sure.
Wouldn't you want
right.
him to be able to go to a place where he was going to be happier? And again, look, I can't tell you that he's down in the mouth or mope. I don't know, but apparently he was quite unhappy, judging by his remarks when he got to Arizona. So if we do know all of that, I can't answer why Lamar would do that. But in my opinion, look, when I first started covering the NFL in 1984, I covered the Cincinnati Bengals. And in the off season, I covered other things.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote college basketball. I was not a 365-day beat guy covering the NFL. And right now, you got 94 people every market who cover the team every day.
That's a great point.
24/7. So, and I'm not saying people shouldn't be suspicious or raise an eyebrow about this. But in my opinion, I just think this is going to go away.
Do you believe that something's going to get done? Like, it's such a weird thing to be hanging over. The Ravens want to pay the guy.
But what here's the question for everybody who said, "Oh my God, he hasn't signed his contract, hasn't done this."
Right.
Here's my question: is Lamar Jackson going to play quarterback for the Ravens in 2022?
Yes.
And so what? I mean, it's good to care because you want to get that headache out of the way. And I don't know why he apparently is not aggressively trying to get it done. I don't know why that is. But I will only say I just am not that curious and not that interested about salaries and about what player is making X, Y, or Z. And I know it's big stories. I get it. But I'm more concerned with who's the quarterback of the Ravens in week 1. It's Lamar Jackson. And if he was really upset and if he was angry about this, he'd be pounding on DeCosta's door or telling Harbaugh he's unhappy or what. That apparently is not happening. So let's just let the contract happen when it happens and watch Lamar Jackson quarterback the Ravens this year.
At Peter_King is how you follow him on Twitter. If you have not read being embedded in the Ravens draft room, you need to go right now to NBCSports.com and do it. Peter, is there anything else we can plug for you, sir?
Not at all. I've been very happy with your various pluggings.
I appreciate you taking the time for us, as
No
always,
problem.
my friend. Glad you enjoyed your time in Baltimore. Let's chat again at some point, all right?
Will do.